All right, hello there, American government students. And our first video this semester will look at what is government, what kind do we have. Our goal is trying to figure out exactly what kind of government we have, and to do that, we have to understand what kind of governments exist in the world. So we're starting here talking about what a government is. So obviously, a government is a group in society, as the note right here says, to the power to make laws and rule over other people. So essentially governs a group in a society, would be a country or a nationality, wherever it is, that can rule over somebody else. So whether it be in school, where you have a principal and teacher ruling over you, a country where you have a president ruling over, or a king, or something like that. So you're always obviously going to have some type of ruler. So the question is, what gives people the authority to do this? Who gives them the permission, if you will, okay, to make that happen? And then next top question is kind of like, well, who should they work for? If you're in power, if you're in government, should you work for yourself or for the people? And there's a should, there's what really happens too. And lastly, what kind of government do we truly have? So why do we have government? So first part is to maintain control. If you look at the idea of anarchy, having no government whatsoever, there's no control. People can do whatever the heck they want to do. And so make sure you have some kind of control to make sure everything doesn't get all crazy like. And with that comes the idea of safety. If we have no laws, okay, most laws are out there to protect people. If we have no laws, people might do some very dangerous things. We complain about speeding a lot, but if there's no speeding regulations, well, people are gonna go fast as they want to and possibly cause accidents and kill somebody. Military taking care of people, murders, that kind of stuff. Whether it be murders or robbing or whatever, robbery or whatever it is, if there's no laws to say no, then it's gonna happen. You know what I mean? So it's that safety issue. It's make sure that things stay fair through justice and equality. The government's supposed to be there to kind of help make sure that, to a degree, and through whatever process they choose, things are equal and fair. Also, simply to organize, administrate, and promote infrastructure. Part of their job is going to be to make sure things stay organized, make sure that everything needs to get done gets done, and make sure that all the pieces are in place, make sure that everything runs smoothly. And then lastly, to support social welfare. The idea that make sure everyone has a good life, everyone is doing what they need to do and living the way they need to live, and that's a big part of why we have a government. So there are a lot of different types of government that are out there. Think about how many you know off the top of your head. You might throw a few out there. Maybe democracy or republics or monarchies or whatever, okay? And maybe remember some from world history last year too. We'll look at a few of them, take a few notes on these. First one obviously is going to be your dictator, okay? And we are talking autocracy. Auto meaning one ruler, all right? One person in charge. And all powers with one person, that's it. So the idea is that they can either get power through taking it, so they're going to walk in, take over, and say, "Hey, I'm in charge now." Awesome, right? Okay. Or they inherit it from a family member or from their political party, wherever it might be. And the biggest thing talking about dictators, absolute monarchs, and totalitarian type governments is that they're going to do a lot of things to make sure they aren't kicked out of power. Whether they do it as a way to manipulate people or to force people, they're going to find ways to make sure they don't lose power, whether it be to get rid of their enemies or to fix the system so that they stay in power all the time. And that's one of their big goals. Now, sometimes these leaders are elected. There's a thing written one time where Saddam Hussein, the former dictator of Iraq, was elected every single time he was in office. He was also the only person on the ballot. Okay, that kind of deal, where you may have the idea of autocracy. If people live in autocracy, what's the deal? The people in autocracy have no real power. They can try and get power. That's called a coup, where they kind of overthrow the leader. But really, you got to follow the ruler's commands, or else you get punishment. And that's kind of one of the big powers. Usually the people are lower than the upper class being the ruler. So you have a really big distinction of power in these autocracy style governments. The only way to really do change is to overthrow a ruler. If you overthrow a ruler, that's the way to do it. So you have to take them out, get rid of them. Otherwise, there's really no chance of change taking place. You can try to petition, ask for things to change, but there's no promise that anything's actually going to work there. So the only way to really make change is to get rid of that ruler and overthrow what's already going on. let's go to democracy. We talk about the United States being a democracy, right? And so the question is, who are the rulers? And the idea of democracy, true democracy, the rulers are going to be the people, because it truly means rule by the people. People are supposed to vote on everything to make the decisions, and it means every decision. If it's a true democracy, true democracy has no president, has no representatives. True democracy has every single citizen voting together. That started in Greece. The city of Athens, you probably remember this from last year in World History, where all the male citizens met on the hill and they voted on all the laws, what to do, and all that kind of stuff. They debated and argued and tried to convince each other of what was the best thing to do. Even back then they couldn't get everybody to vote though, because they had to find citizens to go and vote sometimes, and they had to argue and had either a voice vote or a secret vote depending on how heated things got. I mean, sometimes they had to yell their votes out. Sometimes they had to take either black or white stones and drop them in a clay pot to see how they voted for something. But people were voting on what to do. Obviously, the people in the situation have the real power. The question is, do you have to vote in a democracy? Well, should you? Well, yeah. But do you have to? No. But the rule is that you needed a certain number of people to have a vote called a quorum. And we'll hear about quorum a lot in terms of meetings of Congress, or if you're in meetings for clubs, organizations, whatever, you have to have a quorum. They couldn't get a quorum in Athens, Greece. They would have a slave run through the marketplace with a rope covered in paint, and wherever citizen the rope touched, they had to go vote that day, kind of thing. If they not, they had to force people. So yeah, that's one of the things. So obviously, people have a choice, and if you're in democracy, you really gotta be willing to work with your government that way. Obviously, change is made by the people. So in a democracy, you want to make change, but people need to convince other people through whatever way is necessary, whether it be through what they say, do, whatever, to convince people to follow their ideas, and then vote the same way. Now, bridging off of democracy is the republic, which was first found in ancient Rome. And it's a little different. Instead of the idea of a true democracy where every single person is voting, who you then elect in the leaders. And obviously we have parts of the system here in the United States as well. So like in ancient Rome, during the time of the Roman Republic, they would elect their consuls or their leader for 1 year. The power of the people here, those leaders have power, but, the people got to choose who those leaders were. And by choosing those leaders, then they also gave them permission, to rule over them. And obviously the question is, who gets to choose these leaders? I mean, if you have only citizens, that can mean a lot of things. And sometimes citizens, like in Rome, meant only men who own property or of a certain age and that kind of thing, and a certain class. In Rome, you couldn't choose certain people. Sometimes you can't choose everything. They couldn't choose senators. They had a right to pick just the consuls who run the country every single day. Very, very similar to what we do, if you will. And the question is, how do you make change in a republic? Well, you got to vote somebody else in to change it up. Whether it be every year, every 2 years, every 4 years, whatever, you got to vote new people in. Or you got to gain voting rights. If you weren't allowed to vote originally, you have to be able to vote. At first in Rome, the lower class plebeians couldn't vote. And then eventually they got the right to vote through through threatening a civil war, got the right to vote. You look at, African Americans voting in the United States, look at women voting in the 1900s, all those things kind of play a role in terms of gaining voting rights, and you kind of see how it compares to our government here today. We're going to kind of skip around a little bit here to some economic systems that play a role in government. And one by here might be capitalism. We hear a lot about the United States being a capitalistic government or a capitalist economy. And so this is basically the idea that in capitalism, where the price of a good depends on supply and demand, this little nexus point right here. If you have, not a lot of it or a lot of stuff, the supply is really, really big, right? Price is going to be going up potentially, okay? Price will go up. If you have not a lot of it, price might end up going down in some cases. If you have way too much, price may end up going down. People don't want it. Demand is low. Price goes down. Demand's high. Price goes up. The idea is trying to find this middle point right here that people, in a way, set the prices by what they want and how much they produce. The question is, how much does government get involved in this process because it's done by the people? Well, there's a French term called laissez-faire that means no government involvement. And originally, governments were not supposed to be involved in a capitalist-style economy. Problem was that Then people took advantage of the system. There's nobody to watch over companies and people and stuff. They cheated. So they made monopolies where they controlled all one part of the government, of the economy, or they treated workers poorly, or there's just these massive inequalities between rich and poor, and it wasn't a good situation. So the government got involved and started making regulations, and regulations, and regulations. And the question is, as the government gets more and more involved, does that make it not a capitalistic type of economy anymore? And that's where the question of socialism came in. These guys up here, Marx and Engels, wrote, talk about socialism and communism because in Europe there were rich factory owners who owned all the big factories. There were a lot of poor workers with this unequal system of the upper class called the bourgeois and the lower class called the proletariat. And the fact that the bourgeois had everything and they controlled all the means of production and the proletariat had absolutely nothing. And so you kind of see this birth of idea that in communism, which we have kind of never actually seen in real reality, but the theory of communism is that all people would share the power. There's no classes. They would share what they need. You work the job your best to get paid what you're worth. But there's no classes. There's no boss and worker. It's just people. Socialism is very, very different. We hear about socialism all the time. We heard it earlier this year with the election of Bernie Sanders, all that kind of stuff. It's essentially an economic system and kind of associated to government where all people get the things they need to survive, whether it be food or housing or healthcare, where it might be. It's not an issue of social classes necessarily, but it's making sure that everyone gets access to what they need to live. So modern day socialism, a country may run parts of the economy. You may see them run healthcare or their schools or that kind of stuff. And it's really popular in European countries, Canada to a degree as well. Like in Canada, there's universal healthcare. You can get whatever kind of surgery you need or drug you need for nothing, right? You go to France and you can get free college. If you pass certain tests, score a certain way, you get free college or you get paid vacations, all those kind of things you can get in a modern socialist country. Said in a pure communism, a pure communism type state, the people have the power because they're all equal and all have to work together. Problem is, can they ever actually work together? Which is why we've never actually seen true communism work. Russia was not a communist country; it was more of a dictatorship. Wasn't truly communism. Talk about socialism. People can depend on the government, and this idea of free riding, where maybe people, kind of take advantage of government and get more stuff than they, maybe need or what it might be. And so there's questions about how both systems would work in reality. Looking at the idea of theocracy real quick, we're kind of running out of time here, but theocracy is ruled by a religious authority. So it could be by a deity or a god, like we saw in ancient Egypt where the pharaoh was a god, or it could be by a priest or religious leader, where the priest or religious leader kind of is in charge of everything. This could be the papal states with the pope, or the ayatollah in Iran, or maybe they basically use a religion for the base of their laws, like Saudi Arabia has Sharia law. And so in a theocracy, the religion is going to be the central point of that government. And the people really need to follow that religious authority. It's not only an earthly government they're following, but also a spiritual authority as well. And you think it really makes that government legitimate when saying, yeah, higher power said I'm in charge, we're all good, right? That kind of stuff. Makes a big difference in terms of that theocracy. And really, how you make a change in a theocracy, you gotta be part of that religious authority and be part of that deal, or, change it. That's about it. One last group to look at, government system to look at, and there's some arguments about this one, is the idea of oligarchy. And that's essentially where a small group of people, like a council or a ruling board, run the city or country where it might be. Usually they're upper class, maybe based on a certain requirement. It could be military status or healthcare or education or wealth, whatever it might be. A lot of times, very, very similar to that autocratic government, except instead of having one person, you have a bunch of people. And so often they're very tyrannical to make sure they keep in charge. And really, power of the people, like we saw in autocracy, there's not much there. Really hard to make change because certain people have all the say in everything. Like when it comes to a democracy republic, people might feel they have a lot of power in some cases, but they really don't because vote might matter because it's going to be those same people, those same oligarchs in charge all the time. And really the only way to really make change in this kind of government is to, make change that ruling group and maybe find a way to get the power themselves and remove that leadership and change how things go. So our big question here is, what are we? You know what we are? we're a lot of different kinds of governments. We're a little bit of democracy, republic, maybe some oligarchy, all that kind of stuff. And we're asking you guys the same exact question: what are we, based off these notes and what we do in class? Thank you very much. Have a great day.